Welcome to episode 116 of Project Geekology. And here we are once again in ancient Egypt. We are approaching the pharaoh of all podcasts and just asking him to let our podcasts go. I am one half of your host, Anthony, and joining me as always is
Dakota, and you guys are playing with the big boys now. We are also joined with a third co-host. Rich, say hello.
Hey guys, pretty excited here. I think this episode's gonna get a lot of juicy reviews.
You think so? Why do you say that?
I mean, just to offset the dryness of Egypt. But no, I think we're we're gonna have scorching hot takes in the sands of time.
I love it. Speaking of juicy reviews, like we've been trying to incorporate, the idea of like, you guys should review our podcast 5 stars, juicy, and we use the term juicy just because it's fun and it caught on somewhere down the line. The only thing I could find that was like remotely juicy in this movie is like there's a scene where Moses has like a bunch of figs in his hand. I'm like, that looks juicy. So
So the funny thing is that I went over that whole spiel and we talked and we didn't even say what movie we were covering, which is gonna be DreamWorks movie in 1998, The Prince of Egypt.
Was it 8 or 1999? I thought it was 1999.
No, it was 98.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So I have a correction to make to you both. I texted you that, The Mummy and this movie, The Prince of Egypt, took place or were released in the same year, but I guess I was a year off or like 6 months off or something like that. But it does share some similarities in terms of, just like certain aspects of the two movies. Like we spoke about some of the characters that exist in The Mummy that actually existed in real life, one of those being Seti the First, the pharaoh. That's the pharaoh that's killed in the beginning of The Mummy. That person, Seti the First, is in this movie depicted as the pharaoh that exists while Moses is still in Egypt before he leaves and goes into the wilderness. But yeah, so there's some connections there. And both films are also very liberal with their interpretations, and they make a lot of creative liberties, I should say. And it works for both movies, and I think it works for this one. So I'm excited to talk about some of that. And yeah, I'll try not to be too Egyptology-ish. That's not a word. I'm trying not to like go crazy with the Egyptology stuff this podcast, because I could probably talk for like 30 minutes about it. But yeah, we're discussing Prince of Egypt, guys. Before we do any of that, though, let's jump into what we've been up to this past week. Rich, I'm gonna hand it off to you. What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. Work-wise, things kind of heat up. I don't know if it kind of always lines up this year. April 20th is my big deadline at work. I have to make sure that there are a lot of things taken care of, submitted, shared. I have to manage over like 12 different people and 200 something students and make sure that everyone meets deadlines. So kind of in the middle of that, that's been taking up a lot of my energy, but also can't forget that the New York Metropolitans have returned home, and I returned home. And I went to opening day, and then I went to the next day, which was bitterly cold.
Oh my God, man.
And stayed
2 days ago, it was like so cold. I don't know how you were, or was that yesterday?
So that was the 4th game, which I did not. Yeah, I went to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I took a day off. Not a day off. It was so cold up here that they actually moved the time from 7:10 to 4:10, and I've never seen it moved because of just the cold. But it was windy and cold, so they moved it.
It was brutal, Anthony. Like this past week in New York, like last week was nice. It
beautiful.
It was almost t-shirt weather, and then this week, like last night, it was in the 20s. It was in the 20 degrees last night. I don't know what is going on with the weather up here.
So yeah,
hey man, we were in a nice crisp like 70 degrees. Today it dropped a little bit to like the morning it was like in the upper 60s, so yeah, it was pretty good.
Rough times for you, sir. But no, it's
Florida, that's like parka weather.
But all in all, it was nice to get back in the swing, nice to go to the games, and My son likes to score the games, so we score it together. So it's just, and honestly, the best part about it is I'm technically outdoors. So I'm when my wife basically wants me to touch grass, that's what I do. I touch it at the baseball field. So what have you been up to, Dakota?
Nice, man. Before we jump over to me, are you still actively playing MLB The Show? Like, how's that going? How's that going?
I'm not going to lie to you. I've been feeling really good about my playing. All right. I'm collecting lots of the cards. I've been closing out collections. There's still, I think it's 4 days left in the season. Like I've gotten almost everything I need for the next, it's called the second inning, which will be kind of like the reward path that I'm really excited that I maxed out the first one. I've got some kind of voucher that I earned for the second one, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I went to the Met game with my friend, and apparently he is somehow more of a degenerate player than I am. So you have to get to a certain level to get a special card for each team, and that is going to be like a pack revealed on April 24th, I believe. So you need to get 15 out of 30 MLB teams. It's quite a lot of XP to earn. Very specific things. You have to pitch with different pitchers. I've been winning games with lots of low level, no name guys because that's all I have available for that team. And I got 15 of them almost, and I'm so proud of that. And this guy goes, well, I got all 30 teams. Now, listen to me. When I tell you that
there's always a bigger degenerate. I think they say that in Phantom Menace or something.
It's just I was sitting there. You don't understand. We're both teachers, right? We both have like families, and I just was like, I don't know. Aside from like using uppers to stay up and never go to sleep, I don't even know how I could play more MLB. But I found out that one of the big mistakes I'm making is I should be playing in Colorado because I like to play at Citi Field. The conditions are the conditions in Queens. But if you play in Colorado every game, it is the high altitude will actually drive the ball out more often. So I could be getting more home runs if I just played in Denver.
That's bizarre. That's okay. It's bizarre that the game uses real world altitude physics in its like programming. I'm actually impressed by that. So if there was any way to like get me into that, if the collecting cards aspect wouldn't work, that actually might, push me over the top. That's kind of cool.
Ooh, I do want to mention I was a little late to sign on today because you said cards. Charlie, my son, started playing the Pokemon Pocket Card trading game. And like we just ripped 10 packs before we got down. Like he was like, "Wait, I have enough to open 10 packs, Dad." And I was like, "Let's go." So it was he got a Pidgeotto EX, which we were pretty excited about.
Excellent. I love that. All right, I'll take it back from you. Let's see. What have I been up to? I think mostly I've been watching the season finale of White Lotus season 3 happened this past weekend. And that was nuts. Like, that was a crazy ending to that show. There's nothing I can say that isn't a spoiler, especially, I know Anthony is watching the first season. I don't know if you finished the first season yet, Anthony. And yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who is listening and potentially wants to watch that show. But very, very good show. Very worth it. And now I am in the middle of season 2 of Severance. So Severance is an Apple TV series where it's like a serious, like, mind-melting show in a very literal sense. So there is this idea, this concept. It's like a parallel world to ours, but in this world, there's a sci-fi concept that's almost Black Mirror-ish, where they introduce this concept of severance, where when you go to work and clock in, there's a chip in your brain that basically like resets. So you have no idea who you are on the outside. You only have an idea of like who you are on the inside. So if you've only been working at this company for a month, technically that individual who you are as a worker has only existed for a month. So you kind of grow into this role. I mean, they're not babies. They understand English and everything, but they have no concept of the outside world. And the people on the outside have no concept of what's happening on the inside world of, a severance, like workflow, whatever. So it's a really crazy system. And as the show goes on, you realize that this company that these severed individuals are working for, Lumen, is not what it seems. It's almost like extreme cult like, has an extreme cult like following and all that, and it's just super freaky stuff. So I'm really enjoying Severance. It's a really cool concept. And yeah, the lines between, you know, the innie, the person who's like the inside you who's working, versus the outside person who's just living their day-to-day life starts to blend, and it's just chaos. Really, really good show. But I think that is all for me this week. Yeah, Anthony, what have you been up to? Have you finished White Lotus season 1?
No, I haven't finished that yet. I don't really have much that I've had going on, except for I'm a week and a half in my new job role. So I've been, you know, doing a lot of learning, a lot of brain dumping. There's definitely a lot that I'm not going to know when I start this role. And it's
how long is the period where you are, you know, training?
It's 2 weeks. 2 weeks of training.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty long training session.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this job role, there's a lot that goes into it. You know, like I could be doing anything from helping somebody reset their password to going into their files and helping them with like program stuff, you know? So there's definitely a lot that I won't know. And the thing is that like there's only so much that the trainers can go over, because not every scenario happens all the time. So
yeah, I worked in an IT job for a little bit. This was back in like 2011, 2012. My least favorite thing to do was reset the drivers for printers, because for some reason printers reset all the time. They just break down constantly and you have to like reset them. I feel like I reset the same printers, you know, in that year and a half that I worked there so many times. Yeah, so that's my least favorite part of that job. But, you know, there was some cool stuff in there. But yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about like our stuff is that a lot of it is like kind of in network, so you can access a lot of like printers because they are in the network, and you know we can go as far as to like logging into like the individual like printer, not just the drivers on a computer, but like, you know, getting the printer, pinging the printer to make sure that it's connecting to the network, you know, just different stuff like that. But the thing is that there's only so much that they can kind of go over. And I mean, the cool thing about the trainer is that he is doing like live calls and like kind of like showing us and like live tickets and stuff. And, you know, just to like show us like the different scenarios and then how to like kind of like annotate like tickets and stuff. You know, I do believe that like I will be busy, but I don't think I'm going to be anywhere as busy as I was working at a branch. And that sounds insane because I'm going to be helping all of the branches. But the thing is that I've been to other branches and a lot of the branches are really slow, dude. Like the one that I was at was like a main hub and like we were just crazy busy all the time. I mean, there are times in a day where it gets a little busy. Like I suspect that like I could probably help, you know, maybe anywhere from, you know, 15 to 30 like max, you know, on a day. And then like maybe the busier days a little bit more than that. Whereas like when I was in a branch, I was helping a lot more people and doing like a lot more transactions, you know, like so I'm pretty used to like high volume, and like this doesn't seem as high volume. It will though once we go through our next merger, so it'll probably pick up a little bit. No, it will pick up a little bit.
Dang, sounds like you are the perfect candidate for a severance.
I do forget about my, you know, outside life when I clock into I clock into work. But yeah, no man. So you know, it's been good. I do like working from home. I don't think I ever want to work in a building again, dude.
I totally get that.
But yeah, man. So yeah, but the biggest thing for me is just work, and you know, not much. I mean, you know, we still watching through One Piece. I hadn't watched any episodes, I think like in a week and a half. I watched some today, so but yeah, man. Nothing crazy, man. I mean, I don't know if you guys have anything else that you needed to add to what you've been up to, but I think it's safe to say we can hop into the topic.
I think, yeah, this is a rare podcast where we actually start talking about the topic at hand prior to the 20-minute mark. So, pat ourselves on the back a little bit there, guys. We are here to talk about The Prince of Egypt. This is an adaptation of the Exodus story, the story of how, in the Bible or the Torah, how Moses led the Hebrew slaves out of captivity from basically a very tyrannical and cruel ruler who's an unnamed pharaoh in the Bible. So, yeah, I think this movie does a really good job of taking what is there in the Bible and just wrapping a motivational children's story. It is very spiritual, and I think it gets the spirit of the story mostly right, even though it does take a lot of creative liberties. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Anthony, you said you hadn't watched this movie since you were a kid.
Yeah, man.
How do you feel going back to it?
It was crazy. It really did bring me back to when I was a kid. I remember I do remember seeing this in theaters, and this was like back in '98. I know I wasn't even 10 yet at that point. So yeah, I was young. I do remember seeing it like, a few more times after that, my parents getting that movie. So I remember seeing it not just once. I saw it like a bunch of times when I was a kid, but like, after a while, like I just never saw it again. I mean, it always like popped up in my mind, and like, I always see it pop up online and be like, man, yeah, I remember that movie. I remember just like how I thought the art was really cool, and I kind of remembered some of the songs a little bit, and yeah, man, it was wild going back to this movie. How about you?
Yeah.
When was the last time you seen this?
I watched it with my wife, Jen. She had never seen it, so I was just like, oh, let's throw it on. It might have been 5, 6, 7 years ago or something like that. It was not super long ago, so I do have this more fresh in my mind than you do. But prior to that, it had been a very long time. Like you, I don't think I saw it in the movie theater, but I did have the DVD. And it was one of my favorite DVDs because it had there was a special feature. That was when when DVDs first came out, the special features, like you needed to watch the special features because it was the coolest concept. Like you just get extra movie.
Yeah. And a lot of background stuff, man. I loved the special features and like extra stuff and like the DVD versions of like the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah,
the
appendices and all that. Yeah.
So yeah, no, you're right. Like that was that time that like we had definitely got extra in the special features.
I feel like nobody cares with the Blu-rays or anything like that. Like if you ever go into like the special features for stuff like that, it's pretty bare. There's not much there. They'll show you like, this is the teaser trailer. This is the regular trailer. This is an interview with the director.
Oh, and that's about it.
Yeah. But there was a really cool special feature on this particular movie that was a rendition of When You Believe. It's the big emotional song when they're leaving Egypt. And it's a multi-language version. So it's the same exact clip of them, like Miriam and Zipporah singing, the song, When You Believe. But every 5 to 10 seconds, it switches to a different language. And it's really well woven. And it's like 25, 30 something languages like throughout the course of the song, and it's a really beautiful piece. You can find it on YouTube, even though nobody like has uploaded a clear version in a very long time. Like the newest version that you can find online, at least on YouTube, is 17 years old.
Oh wow.
So it looks like it was recorded on a potato, but it's a really beautiful scene, and if you have the DVD, that would be the ideal way to watch that. But yeah, I do not have that anymore.
Yeah, no, same here. It's been lost over the years. But
lost to time. It is now ancient history. But we have someone on the podcast who had never seen this movie before.
It's like you guys, I don't know how you found the dark recesses of my mind for things that either I've stayed away from on purpose, purposely stay away from, or things that I just, okay. Well, you said that Val Kilmer was the voice of God.
And
Yeah.
Moses, right?
Yeah, and Moses. Well, that's the best
No,
part.
he's not the voice of Moses.
He's Ramses.
No, he's not Ramses.
Wait.
I think he's literally just God. I think he's
No, no.
yeah.
No. I think he
he's
has
Ramses.
multiple voices. I think he's two voices.
He's
Does he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has
no.
two
Ramses
voices.
might be like as Fiennes, Ralph Fiennes, and I thought that
Yeah,
Val
that's
Kilmer
Ralph
is
Fiennes.
Moses.
That's Voldemort.
Isn't Val Kilmer
Am I wrong?
Moses and God?
Prince of
Yeah, Val
Egypt.
Kilmer was
Maybe-
Moses.
Oh snap! Okay, so I was confusing because I listened to the music. Oh yeah,
So
Moses
this
and
makes
God.
it
Okay.
so that makes it hilarious because I did not even know this was an animated movie. There's like this movie I didn't know anything about it, right? I thought it was
love
going to
it.
be like Ben-Hur, right? And that Val
Okay,
Kilmer
yeah.
was playing the voice of God. So when I saw that it was animated, I was like, "Whoa, what?" So I was already super surprised going into it because I can't explain to you why I like DreamWorks movies. I've seen many other DreamWorks movies. I don't remember this existing. I've never seen the movie, the cover, the poster. I don't remember seeing a commercial.
Wow.
I couldn't believe how many people were in the movie that I know. I was like,
It's a massive cast.
Jeff Goldblum
Yeah,
before
man.
Goldblum. Like, I mean,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
Martin Short. What's his buddy? That Steve Martin.
Steve Martin.
right? Sandra Bullock's in it. I was like, whoa.
Helen Mirren.
Yeah, Helen Mirren.
Patrick Stewart.
when I heard Patrick,
Michelle Pfeiffer.
when I
This
heard,
was actually like a stacked. This
insane.
movie
Yeah,
was
this
stacked.
is a stacked cast. Yeah.
I heard
Really,
Patrick
really
Stewart's
stacked.
voice, and I paused the movie, and I went, "Who the, pardon my French, is in this movie?" And I, went ahead and was like, "Oh man, this is nuts." So
I had this. I think it was the exact same moment where I heard a voice that I recognized. I was just like, I can't picture who this is in my head, but I recognize that voice so well, and I looked it up. Yeah, and that's also when I saw the cast. So the reason I was so convinced that Val Kilmer wasn't the voice of Moses is because he doesn't do the singing role.
Yeah.
oh
no,
yeah,
Definitely not.
That's what threw me off there. But like Ralph Fiennes does do the singing role, so he plays Ramses. And dude, I love, first of all, the music in this movie is just so incredible. The song "Let My People Go," where it's like it doubles with Moses singing "Why Won't You Let My People Go," and he goes, "I will not let my people your people go." It's such a great duet. And whenever I hear Ralph Fiennes, I cannot not picture Voldemort. So I'm just picturing Voldemort singing. So if you ever listen to what's the name of that song? I want to actually. It is called. Oh, it's called "The Plagues." Yeah, that's the name of the song. It's Ralph Fiennes and Amick Byram, who I thought was the voice of Moses.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like Voldemort. If you listen to that with the lens of this is Voldemort singing, it's so much funnier.
I know that we decided to cover this movie. We thought it would be fun to stay in Egypt, but also Val Kilmer, he does a couple of voices in this movie, two major characters, and
I was wondering why he got top billing. I kept looking at it. I was just like, man, he only has a couple lines. I don't know why he's like the top billed actor on this. But that changes the way I see the movie. Actually.
Yeah.
I don't know how I didn't realize that. But all right, cool.
But yeah, man, we lost him a couple weeks ago,
know.
man. Or was it last week?
It was last
Week, yeah. So yeah, man, going back, watching it as an adult, you have much more of an appreciation for the artwork of stuff, and the artwork in this is so good, man. I'm like, this was 1998.
It's gorgeous.
98.
Yeah. It's so creative, the way that the backgrounds are just the really bright pastel colors and the really fluid motion of the animated characters, and it blends that cartoony vibe that is so typical of DreamWorks and Disney at that time, the facial expressions that characters make, the sinister grins that the evil dudes have. It blends all of that so well, and it really takes a lot of creative license with incorporating Egyptian iconography and stuff into it. I last week when we were talking about The Mummy, I kept saying whenever it's a Egypt movie, they have to put the pyramids in the background. They can't help themselves. They did that in this one too. This doesn't take place anywhere near that, but hey, they're right there.
Hey man, look, we have to let people know that it's in Egypt.
Yes, I know.
One of the things that I really liked about, and kind of like going back a little bit to the artwork, is that like it's 2D animation, but they give it like dimension. Like it looks almost 3D, but it's 2D.
Yeah, they did the same thing that like early Avatar did, where it is a 2D show, or in this case it's a 2D movie, but they do incorporate slight CGI elements that you will notice if you like are paying attention. Like the scene where Moses' mother sends him into the river with in the basket. The basket is CGI.
Yeah,
but it's like a flat CGI, so it blends in with the 2D animation. It's really really clever. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, I thought that really held up. Like, because I'm thinking, oh man, it's a 1999 movie. What's the animation gonna be like? But I thought it definitely is in that like Mulan-ish kind of style. It's definitely crisper than like, of course I'm going to reference another kind of Middle Eastern, Aladdin. I loved that movie, and I watched it a couple years ago, and the animation's just a bit behind this. So
yeah, it's like around the time of like Lion King and all that. It's like the early 90s Disney movies they weren't as, I don't want to say they weren't as creative, but it was just a different art style, that doesn't necessarily hold up today because it's not incorporated at all today.
Yeah. So that's why this to me I was like pleasantly surprised. I'm like, for a 25 or more year old movie, 27, that's older than my students. That's crazy, and it's actually it looks better than Minecraft. Sorry, had to take a shot.
Well, Minecraft was purposeful though.
I know, but let's not get into that. That's a whole nother episode, gentlemen.
That could be, but
have you guys seen the Minecraft movie or a Minecraft movie, whatever it's called?
I'm politically
I actually
opposed.
did.
Oh boy,
you didn't bring it up?
I forgot.
We don't have to say anything else, guys. We don't have to say anything more.
Well, honestly, to tell you the truth, like, I mean, you might not like it, but like Dakota and I were like really big into it before it blew up, actually.
Yeah, we were playing the beta before it was like a...
Yeah. I would say, like, I think, 2012, 2013, like, around there is when it blew up. We were playing this, like, back in, like, 2010.
I'm going to put it this way.
Yeah,
did you guys grow up with Polaroid cameras?
Yeah, they're around, yeah. Like, people would use them.
They weren't popular. They weren't popular.
So they were I'm a little bit older. They were very popular, right? My grandfather, I mean, that's all we used, basically, all right?
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure it's older than you.
Yeah, it's older than me, but that was our
70s,
prime, like photography method. And I, when I got something better, I was like, wow, this is so much. Like, why would I ever go back? And now my students walk in with Polaroids, and they're like, oh, isn't this so cool? And they're waving it, and the quality is terrible, like, because they've got these terrible ones. And that's kind of
it's just like the $5 Polaroid cameras. Yeah,
and that's kind of how I feel. And I don't want to insult more, but that's how I feel about Minecraft, because for me, the style harkens back to when I didn't have a choice. So I don't want to return to the choice. So for me, it's like, playing Atari was rough, man.
There's actually some really good, and I'm gonna leave it at this because we got to get back to the movie. But there's some really good indie video games that like tap into that retro vibe that like you're completely missing out on if you don't like that vibe. I'm telling you, there's a lot of really good ones.
Like Cuphead.
Cuphead, dude, Cuphead's really good. Well, there's Cuphead. You also have Octopath Traveler, which is really good. There's a lot.
Stardew.
Yeah, Stardew's really good.
Well, just like the thing is,
Hollow Knight.
The just how Styx said, in Mr. Roboto,
my dude.
I believe the line is, "I am the modern man," and that's all I've got. But speaking of going back in time and using things like papyrus, I don't know. I thought the beginning of the movie kind of threw me off a little bit. It actually made me pause and go and read websites, because there was no mention before Moses is sent down the river. You see the soldiers moving in the background,
Oh,
but for an
interesting. Okay.
informative movie, right? For a children's movie, right? There was no like decree, like heard, like firstborn, son, Hebrew boys will be killed. Because
Yes.
I sat there and I went, why is she sending him away? And like, I know I was kind of naive in the moment, but I was like, her two other kids are fine. Why is she only sending this one away? I was really kind of thrown off for a second because I remembered it in my head that I knew the announcement was made. So that's why they did this, right? Or that's why she had to make this decision. Right. And then it doesn't get, we find out later, obviously, but in the moment, especially because that's the most screen time the mom gets, you figure it's just like all I see is her running away and then just sending one of her kids down the river, and that's it. So I went to Catholic school and everything growing up, so I was, wait a minute, I'm like, I've heard this story before, like this isn't right, and I think the liberties they took were just difficult for me because
you know the story so well. And I'm also in the same boat where the account is very clear. After she, sends him into the river and is found by Pharaoh's daughter, she's raised by Pharaoh's daughter, but Miriam, Moses' sister, kind of tricks Pharaoh's daughter into, calling for, like a wet nurse. And that wet nurse, quote unquote, is actually Moses' real mother. So Moses' real mother raises Moses as the son of the daughter of Pharaoh. So she should have been in the movie more. Yeah.
Yeah, and that threw me off because it gave me this. I was just like, why is she, doing all this, and then that's it, and then we don't see her ever, and that was a little. And then that also creates the moment later in the movie, where Moses had completely no idea, and he ran, and it just, look, I'm gonna say this about it. Anytime I read a book before I watch a movie, the way I saw it in my head is the way that's the canon. All right. And if you change 100%. It, I'm going to be disgruntled.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I feel the same way, actually. I think because I wasn't so critical of the adaptive qualities when I was a kid, I look over everything like that. But, as an adult who has, obviously read this account, it's a little bit harder to swallow. And it's not up there with the most faithful biblical adaptations out there, but for instance, he finds out they set this all into motion so that he can have this dramatic reveal that he isn't actually Egyptian, but one of the Hebrews, one of the slaves, and that sets him on a path that eventually leads him to killing one of the enforcers who's whipping a Hebrew slave. In the movie, that makes sense, but in the reality of the story that's told in Exodus, he knew he was a Hebrew growing up. It says that he was, sympathetic to the cause of the slaves. Like that was part of his personality, But yeah, if we're going to be really critical about every single thing that they changed, we'd be talking for 2 hours. But yeah.
Yeah, man.
Anthony, what are your thoughts on the changes like that? Do you mind as much?
I mean, growing up and reading and knowing the story, it hits you with hey, that's not right. But from a entertainment perspective, it, not all the changes were bad. I mean, I guess depending on who you ask, it can be bad, but I guess for the movie purposes, it wasn't bad,
It gets most of the beats, mostly.
Right.
That's where I kind of fall with it. At the end of the day, Moses does get the people out of Egypt. That's
right. I think some of the major things that happen, the burning bush.
Yeah. Which is actually, that's a fantastic scene. It gives me chills every time I watch it. Take your sandals off. You're standing on holy ground. That's so good. And now that I know that Val Kilmer was talking to himself in that scene, it just kind of elevates that performance even more.
Dude, he was in a sound booth doing both parts in that.
I feel like they
He
had
was like,
so
all right,
many-
he had two mics, and he had to like run back and forth.
But they had
between-
One had a little bit more
They had
reverb.
so
Yeah,
many.
yeah.
Like what I just, and I'm sure there's a way to find out, right? But you have so many different actors, like big name actors for this movie, and Val Kilmer gets 2 roles. Like I like somebody else. It could have been a nice little Easter egg, or maybe Mr. Feeney. He wasn't Mr. Feeney yet. He had finished Knight Rider. That would have been. I don't know. It's a weird, unless like that was in the contract, or why would you get both?
Maybe he really liked this story. I don't know. Maybe he was just like, I gotta get. Maybe he signed on for Moses, and while in the recording booth, he like did a couple lines, and they're like, oh, I kind of like that.
It's also it's not really uncommon for somebody to get multiple roles in an animation, and the thing is that like something that Dakota said earlier. Why would you hire this whole other person to speak like a few lines in a movie? So like they already had like a cast set. I mean, it could have been somebody else within the cast, yeah, of course, but they decided to go with Val Kilmer. But yeah, like I don't think that there somebody getting a double role in the movie was a bad thing. I mean, I see it all the time. Yeah. Video games do it.
Anime definitely does.
Yeah, anime. Oh my gosh, dude, anime. If you look at some of these credits in an anime, like some of the people, they'll have credit for voicing like 5 people, dude. It's crazy. But dude, you knew that the voice of God was Val Kilmer, but you didn't know that it was Moses. So he did a good enough performance to separate himself.
They're definitely separate.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. So I mean, I think he did a great job.
Yeah, no, he killed it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think Moses is what's funny, like if they had chosen to go like a more biblically accurate route, I don't think they would have chosen Jeff Goldblum for Aaron.
Dude, you can hear that it's him.
Oh,
it's very much so his voice. That's crazy. Yeah. I remember like hearing that and I was like, wait, I said, is that who I think it is? And then I looked it up and I was like, yep, that's absolutely him.
Yep. Yeah, so like the actual account, whenever like Moses is speaking to Pharaoh, it's never actually Moses speaking to Pharaoh, because Moses claimed that he had a speech impediment. So, like when at the burning bush scene in the Bible, like he's just like, but I'm not very articulate. I don't speak well. God's like, I'm bringing Aaron over and he's going to be your mouthpiece, basically. So he's actually the one who speaks to Pharaoh every time. So having Jeff Goldblum be like, yeah, you're going to let the people go, probably wouldn't have worked.
Dude, he was like the most like he stuck out like a sore thumb, like as far as voices, dude.
Oh yeah, he never sounds not like Jeff Goldblum. Like it's the most distinct voice.
Like,
but it was good to it's always fun to like hear him.
Like Patrick Stewart did well enough to not sound like himself. At least to me. I don't think I picked it up until
I recognized the voice. I just could not put a name to it.
I don't know. I absolutely love him. I mean, I've heard his voice in so many different roles that's what he was the guy. He was the impetus for me to stop and check out the voice cast, because once I heard my man Patrick Stewart, I was like,
oh, okay,
that's my captain, Jean-Luc Picard. I mean, I watched a lot of Next Generation.
Yeah, there was
that's
one
Spaceballs, right?
What?
That's Spaceballs, right?
Are you? Oh, you're pulling my leg. You're pulling my leg. You guys are listening.
Oh, man, you should have seen Rich's face, guys. He was looking at the camera like, are you kidding me?
I didn't know what I was going to do.
He was looking like he needed somebody to snap him a Slim Jim.
Yeah, we should actually do Spaceballs at some point. Like, that's actually a really fun movie.
Yeah, it is. It is. It was actually like one of the decent parodies, So.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this film, there was a fair bit of musical numbers, but like it wasn't like over the top where it felt like it was like a straight up musical, I felt like the musical numbers were like well placed, and they really like drove, like, some of them were like, lighthearted, and some of them were very dramatic, and I felt like they were great. The musical numbers were all like really good.
Well, that's the thing too. Like with the musical numbers, they drove the plot forward.
Yeah.
Whenever it was a musical scene, they express a jump in the story. They kind of bridge gaps, except for the scene where they're leaving Egypt. Like that was, like very intentionally, like in the moment.
Yeah.
But most of the musical scenes that happen showcase time moving on. There's the song "The Plagues."
Yeah.
That happened over a long period of time. In the actual Book of Exodus. But in the movie, that's a 4-minute scene. They kind of encapsulate that into like 4 minutes through song. And even like the beginning, where like Rich, you were saying that you were having trouble following, or you didn't understand the decree. They do, like you said, you have the soldiers running in the background in that scene. Like trying to find young Hebrew boys, basically. But if you're rewatching that with like looking for those things, you'll find it. You'll find that kind of stuff hidden in that song number, basically, and it does inch you into the story. But like if you take other movies, like I think Frozen, when it's a musical number in Frozen, I'm thinking like Let It Go. They pause the movie so that Elsa can sing Let It Go. Like it breaks the movie up. It's not a narrative song that moves the story forward. It's a pause in the movie so that Elsa can sing, versus this movie, which is all narrative driven like songs, and I think that works so well, and it makes it not feel like a musical.
Right. Like, so you were talking about Plagues and how that is like showcasing something that happens over a period of time, and I think that they do well in showing that it is something that's happening over time, just like condensed for the song, like the drought and the famine, and it showed like you can tell, especially like watching it, I was like, yeah, this is something that's happening over time. This isn't something that's happening in the span of a day or a couple days, and so there's that, and then like the whole development of his relationship with his wife, Moses, from like the start up until they get married. That drives the narrative of them establishing that relationship up to the point to where they get married. So yeah, no, you're right. Like they do such a good job at like picking really good songs and really like doing a lot within those songs.
While I was looking for like where to stream this movie, I discovered that there's a second movie in this vein that I had never even heard of. It was like a direct-to-DVD sequel, but it's actually a prequel because it's about Joseph. It's called Joseph something Dreams.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've never heard of it.
I seen it long time ago.
Yeah, anyway, I was just like so surprised that movie even existed. And yeah, just a short aside. Speaking about the plagues, the first plague where he turns the water into blood. What a great scene.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like that's so... it's just such a powerful moment, like just the staff going into the water and the way that they visualize the slow, spread of it turning into blood and how that affects the Egyptians in the water. Super cool the way they did that.
And it looks like actual, like, like if you were like blood in the water, it looked exactly like that real effect.
It spreads like that, yeah. If you go back to that scene when Moses is standing in the river, you can see that there's like a ring around him of like normal water.
Yep.
And then after that point, it's red. That's such a cool
little
detail.
Yeah.
It's such a cool detail because it didn't affect the Hebrews. This plague didn't affect the Hebrews. So like they had regular drinking water. The Egyptians did not. Thinking about that, that is cool. Like that, when they do stuff like that in this movie or other movies like it, where, like this is a detail that you don't need to have for the story to continue, but it just makes it so much cooler. I don't know.
Yeah. Another scene that like really really blew me away too was the parting of the Red Sea. That was insane, dude. And like like how massive both sides looked.
Yeah, it's just like a super stylized like wave almost that doesn't crash. Really, really cool. Rich, what do you think of that scene?
That scene was the second time that I paused the movie so that I wanted to do a little research, and I was like,
Oh, okay.
just delving into different weird stuff, just like the interpretation that it was maybe sea of reeds, and that
That is so that's a possible interpretation.
so that it's like, because I always like kind of recontextualizing stuff in that way to kind of digest it differently, I would say, than when I was when I was a wee lad listening to the stories in school and at Sunday Mass in Spanish, which was that much harder to suss out what I was really understanding. I'd be like, wait a minute, did that guy do this? And like the grandfather's like, yep, his name's Job. We'll talk about him later. So I
for those listening who aren't following with the Sea of Reeds, there's a belief out there that the Red Sea is a misnomer or a mistranslation that has occurred over the course of years, and that it's the Sea of Reeds that is most likely, or that some people believe is most likely to be the location where that could have happened or would have happened. But yeah, it's a theory. I don't want to say yes or no or anything like that.
I have no idea. I've read one article about it. When I was watching the movie, and I went back to it.
It is a cool theory. No. And like you said, it's cool to recontextualize. But
obviously, I'm glad the movie did not go with that kind of line of thinking, because the wall of water, and I mean, and then even with the visual play it had with the fire blocking the Egyptians, that was a really, it was cool, because I think it's really easy to mess that scene up, because everybody watching, I would assume almost everybody watching this, in my opinion, knows that part, right? Like that's the part that, like,
when I watched the Ridley Scott movie, Exodus, Gods and Kings, and the sea just like dries up because it's just like the low tide or whatever, that was the most disappointed moment I think I've ever been in a movie theater. I was just like, oh, come on. Mm-hmm. Like, that's so lame.
Yeah.
Show me the magic. Show me the miracles, dude. But yeah, this movie.
Yeah, and it gives you, because I got lulled into, all right, they're leaving, and I was like, I guess they're just gonna hit the impasse, but then he's gonna split it, so we're good. And then you have the Egyptians coming over the hill, just have you see Ramses' head kind of pokes up, and that's when you're like, oh, what? And that's why, like, the fire was great too, because then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's no way they're gonna get through that fast. So they kind of thought of everything there to really heighten the drama, and then kind of make everything believable in the world they had already built, right? There was nothing there that was extraordinary or unbelievable for what we've already accepted can happen in this world.
Totally. Yeah
That pillar of fire was actually really cool.
They did a really cool job with that. Yeah, for sure. Speaking about recontextualizing common knowledge, or like what we perceive to know about these stories, a common thing for people who want to, whether you believe in this story or not, like there are certain things in history that could tie this story to reality. Mm-hmm. And a common thing that like atheists and certain scholars will try to suggest, that because the Bible says that that the Hebrews lived in the city of Ramesses, this must mean that it's suggesting that they existed during the reign of Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, basically, who's like the most praised, or like he's the most popular pharaoh in Egypt in terms of like the works that he created. So it's actually an anachronism. So how do I explain this without like stumbling over myself? So Ramesses, he existed in the 19th dynasty. The story of Exodus dates itself much earlier, a couple hundred years earlier. And that obviously doesn't line up chronology-wise. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for proof that the Israelites were a people that existed in Ramesses the Great's Egypt, you're not going to find that. So you'd have to look elsewhere. Either, it would have to be quite a bit before Ramesses. So like there are certain theories as to like what pharaohs actually existed, because the pharaoh itself isn't named in that account. But we know that when it says the city of Ramesses in the book of Exodus, we know that that's an anachronism, or like it doesn't work in that time frame, because they use the term the city of Ramesses 400 years earlier in Joseph's time. So he can't have existed back then as well, you know? So most likely, in the course of hundreds of years of translating, it became known that area of the world became known as Pi Ramesses. So they would just say the city of Ramesses in translations of the Bible so that people would know where exactly the Israelites were at the time when they were in Egypt. So yeah, that idea that Ramesses the Great is the pharaoh of the book of Exodus is just, it's a complete misreading of the text. But there are a couple pharaohs out there that, if you contextualize their story with what happens in or after the book of Exodus, it does match up pretty cool. I don't know if you guys want me to tell about those or not, but we can continue talking about the Prince of Egypt.
No. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, you can
Egyptology.
You can like put it down, because I mean it's all like relevant, because it ties back to the story that this movie is based off of.
Okay. I feel like you should do timelines. All right, so like this, you really kind of.
I might have a timeline. I think
you have a knack for this.
Okay. All right. So we'll start. My two favorite theories are Pharaoh Akhenaten of the 18th dynasty and Dudimos of the 14th dynasty, or 13th dynasty. Yeah, so let's start with Akhenaten. So it's a little bit closer to Ramesses' time period. His father, or actually it would be Amenhotep III, would be the pharaoh of Egypt in this telling, basically. So Amenhotep III exists, the story of Exodus happens, and then something strange happens in the next pharaoh's run, where Amenhotep IV changes his name to Akhenaten and decides we're only worshiping one god now. Not the 300 gods that we've had for all of Egyptian history, but we're going to serve a monotheistic god now. So the idea there is that there was such religious and cultural upheaval because of what happened to the Egyptians at the time, that the next pharaoh was just like, no, we got to worship that god instead. Mm-hmm. And he's the only pharaoh in all of Egyptian history that is a monotheist. But it's not necessarily the Hebrew god he's worshiping. He's worshiping the Egyptian sun god, Aten, as the one and only god. So that's a theory. I don't know if I buy it. The one that makes the most sense to me is Dudimos. So for him, this one's pretty cool. There's a Jewish historian that existed around the time of Jesus' day who quoted an Egyptian historian from a couple hundred years earlier named Manethos. So Josephus is the Jewish historian. He quotes Manethos. Manethos is a historian of Egypt, and he basically said that in Dudimos' reign, Pharaoh Dudimos, or he called him Ptolemaios, he says, in Ptolemaios' rule, God smote him, or God blasted him, and sent him into ruin. And then after that point, other nations raided Egypt because there was a power vacuum. And that basically that was the end of the Middle Kingdom and the start of the second intermediate, something like that. Yeah, the second intermediate period, where basically like there was a period of time where like Egypt was broken. They were just completely broke for a short period of time before the new kingdom popped up and Egypt got on its feet again. So the theory there is that quote from the Egyptian historian Manethos is basically saying that, this singular god brought Egypt down in this guy's reign, and afterwards other nations basically raided Egypt because they were very easy to raid at that point. They had no workforce. So it's a cool theory. It lines up better. Like that would be the closest chronologically to what the Bible says, or what Exodus says is the timeline of that event. And I think it's only like 50 or 60 years off the mark, maybe a little more than that. So it's a possibility. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking now because I'm going crazy here. But yeah, were you guys able to keep up with that? I don't know if that made any sense.
Totally.
No. Yeah, okay. I understood that like you were, that there's a lot of like theories out there, and that one kind of lines up with the other. That's the crazy thing about like things that are not, I guess, like heavily documented. So like a lot of it's just speculation at this point.
Correct. Yeah, and
Um,
like Dudamos, the one that I believe is closest to the pharaoh of the Egyptian or like the Exodus account, very little is known about his reign outside of what that Egyptian historian Manethos from like 2 BCE had to say about him.
that's
So
such a cool name though, Dudamos.
Dudamos, Dudimose. Yeah,
Dude, man, he was a dude.
he was the dude who did not let people go. Maybe. All right, let's jump back into the movie. Did you guys have any other thoughts about anything?
I thought it was going to be more like Disney. I guess I was expecting a little bit more jazzy numbers at first. So like they were really well done and powerful.
There is a jazzy number.
Yeah, there's one. But I was, look, growing up, I watched a lot of the Disney movies over and over again because that was always like, I have a sister who's a year younger than me. So she, we would,
blame it on
we
the
would have
sister.
to trade off, so I wanted to watch Batman 89, but I had to go watch, Lion King again or Little Mermaid or whatever. So, Aladdin is one of my favorites. And part of it is that the music was fun, I guess like fun to follow. And there is a point where earlier you guys mentioned how that it moves the plot, right? Well, my brain from like a small child was trained that the way I could get through the movies that I did want to watch was to kind of like block out the songs a little bit, right? Which is crazy. And I know this is crazy because all those movies have songs. So my first watch of the movie, because you guys know I always watch it twice, I kind of zoned out during the song, right? And then the songs would end and I'm going, oh, whoa.
Scene change.
Something, I'm like, something happened, right? So I found myself 2 or 3 times going back because I listen to the melody and everything, but I just don't, like, I'm not processing because, like you said, like with Elsa singing, like I'm kind of ready to, I almost kind of consider it break time for my brain,
You clock
yeah,
out.
It's a Hakuna Matata, man, just a wonderful phrase, it's just, no big deal. And I think that's the one thing that I'm not used to a lot. I guess I'm used to more musical numbers being the performance piece and not a narrative piece.
Well, DreamWorks isn't really like that though. DreamWorks is like nothing like Disney. A lot of the musical numbers in their movies, and I'm not saying that every movie's like that, but a lot of them drive the narrative. Like, even with, what do you call it? Like Shrek. Shrek had, those musical numbers were just silly ones, but there was a lot that was happening in those musical numbers, like the development of the relationship between, Shrek and Fiona.
Yeah.
So, like, DreamWorks is very much so like, their music, it may be silly in some movies, but they're trying to drive the story along and not pause the movie.
I never thought about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, dude.
I guess I didn't see it with Shrek because Shrek had like, what's a hero for hire or whatever. I need a hero in that kind of sequence, right? Since they had some of the popular tunes that I knew growing up from like 80s movies, I think it made it more accessible in some ways. And a lot of those were like a montage set to like an awesome 80s song.
Yeah, it's mostly montages. Yeah.
Like those I can pay attention. That's like a little bit, I don't know. It's just the way my brain works. I think when I hear music, I'm just like expecting like some mindless tune and it tricked me. So that I did have to go back. And then I was more appreciative of it, because since I had it really kind of caught it the first time, my second watch through, I was expecting it more, and I knew some of the lyrics of the songs, so it was definitely a more enjoyable second watch. And part of that was also because I didn't even know I was about to watch an animated movie. I had no idea there was going to be singing, so like my expectations were completely flipped. So the second watch was kind of a little bit, I think, more informative.
Would you say that after the second watch, you were delivered?
Yeah, I didn't want to let go. I was like, I'm not going to let go. And then it was like, no, you'll let go. And I was like, I won't let go. And it was like, you'll let go. And eventually I found myself letting go.
This guy is
like for me, it was a great rewatch, kind of going back to a movie of my youth that, I remember seeing way back, and I remember seeing a lot of it when I was younger. But yeah, man, it was fun. I forgot how much I enjoyed that movie.
It's a good comparison that you made, Rich, to Disney movies, especially like classic Disney movies, because when there is musical numbers, there's occasionally a pretty significant villain musical number. You know, in Little Mermaid, you have Poor Unfortunate Souls sung by Ursula. We have Scar's song. I forget the name of Scar's song, but it's basically like almost like a Nazi march.
I think it was
of
Be
hyenas.
Prepared.
Be prepared. Yeah. Oh, such a good one. As soon as you say be prepared, like you hear be prepared. I'm thinking of others. Mother Knows Best in Entangled, Mother Gothel's song. There's tons of them. But anyway, in this movie, one of my favorite villain songs of all time is Playing with the Big Boys.
That was good.
The snake
It's
scene.
just the snake scene with Steve Martin and Martin Short. Oh
And
my
I think
gosh.
that's what made me think, like, I was like, that scene, right? Like, that's what I was waiting for more of, you know, like that. I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah, I will say that probably didn't move the story along as much, but it is an important scene in the narrative of the actual story, because it's basically the first time, you know, God tells Moses to perform a miracle in front of Pharaoh. But the way that they do it, where the magic practicing priests decide that they're just going to show off all their gods, is so good, because it just goes way harder than it needs to, basically. It's a good
love
time.
that scene. Yeah, that one was really fun. And that's kind of a little bit the style look, the songs that I liked most in the Disney movies, you know, were like, if we're talking about Aladdin, I like Street Rat, where it's a kind of like fast paced, like jokey kind of going on. Whereas like, you know, I was definitely rolling my eyes when A Whole New World was coming on when I was a kid. I was like, oh, not this one again, you know? So it was part of me being like, also, I think it's like when I watch a movie like this, I'm kind of like a 12-year-old boy again, you know, going like, all right, well, I can watch some of these, you know, but like, don't tell my friends, and I don't like that one and that one, but that one's okay, you know?
Watching Aladdin as an adult is interesting, because A Whole New World has an entirely different meaning. It's a massive innuendo. Like, there's no way it isn't. There's no way. Like, every single line in that is it has to be. Like, there's
and Jafar is way creepier. You know, when you're like, that's like the Sultan's friend, right? Like, you dudes are the same age. Like, whoa, what is happening here?
Speaking about age, that's another thing that this movie takes liberty with. Moses was 80 years old when he liberated Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a kid's movie.
And he would look like 30, 40. Like, maybe in his 40s, mid 40s.
I know that. I know that you want to end on a nice note, all right? I found myself binge watched all the Planet of the Apes movies, all right? Oh my goodness. Nice. Oh my goodness. But there is a kind of, well, what I thought was I was going to see. I thought I was going to see the similar scene because, you know, that's the story, right? And it's okay to kind of end with a bittersweet moment, right? So I'm waiting I'm like, what are they going to do here? I'm like tapping the screen going, how are they
going to show the golden calf?
Like, what are you doing? You know? and I kind of thought you were going to get that moment like in the Planet of the Apes where, you know, he leads them to the promised land, but he dies right there as he'll never be able to, right?
Oh, yeah. No, they weren't going to go another 40 years.
Yeah. No, this was just like the story of Exodus. Like, this isn't... Yeah. This wasn't going to, like, go into all that.
This is not Endgame.
But yet, gentlemen, we are getting super deep and kind of, like, going off on tangents. I think it is time to wrap this one up.
Like a mummy?
All right, we gotta let.
Are we ready?
We have to let it go.
You know,
let our podcast go.
Dude, I need to be delivered from.
Anthony's ready to get severed.
He's got a long commute home.
Yeah, that long commute home for Anthony. Oh man! All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 116th episode of Project Geekology. If you haven't checked out Prince of Egypt, I personally recommend it just because I think that they did a really good job of using their creative license to tell a unique take on a very classic story. I'm guessing from the discussion, our co-hosts also believe the same. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Yeah, I really like. I mean, I'm always the guy who's gonna be like, "Where's Tom Bombadil?" So that's always gonna give me a problem.
Yeah.
But once I can get over that, I think it was really well done.
Excellent. All right, guys. So you heard it here. Check out Prince of Egypt if you haven't already. And yeah, if you haven't decided to, check out and review our page, we're always looking for good reviews, specifically juicy ones. Anthony, how many stars is a juicy review?
We need 5 flame broiled juicy stars, man.
Make sure they're sizzling, guys. All right. Have a good one.
Goodbye, y'all.
You're no longer playing with the big boys. Bye, guys.